Hello, Computer Music One. It is online live. Today is the what, 2nd
Yeah.
of September, 2nd of September, and we've got Claire online, and we have Hunter, who's just joining us now, and Marty, who's online, and I've got Nick here in the classroom. We'll just use this way to do it. There's Nick, and I'm hoping that on the recording you're getting the video. If you're not getting the video, then I'm going to try. I'll see after we save the recording, and I'll see what we can do to make sure that that happens. All right, you should be seeing. There's my screen there. In fact, maybe this is the best way to do it. If I show my screen, and then I show the webcam. Let's see if we can get this to work. There we go. So you guys at home are seeing the screen and the camera. Is that right?
Yeah.
And are you seeing the camera in the screen window, or are you seeing it in a separate window?
I'm seeing in the screen window.
Okay. So I'm gonna try and make the recording this way, and we'll see if it works. I'm gonna stop the recording and I'm gonna start again. Now that although you know what, maybe I'm not gonna stop the recording. Let's try it one more time, because last time I stopped the recording, I think it changed the settings. Hold on with record. There we go. Welcome, class, to Computer Music 1 online live for the 2nd of September. Today, we are probably going to be spending most of our time talking about information for the first quiz. We have Claire and Hunter and Marty online with us, and maybe some others will be joining us. And we've got Nick here in the room. Shout out to Nick. There's Nick. And want to start by first addressing some questions that have maybe come up on the quiz already. Now remember, a couple of things to remember about the quiz is that you are encouraged to take the quiz twice. I think everybody got the information that I sent out yesterday. If you have not been able to buy the textbook, we've added a link, and you can see that here. Click here for the Hoskin chapters 1 through 3. Also, I was noticing that there were problems with the updating of, the loading of videos inside Canvas, and so I started a YouTube channel, and I'm posting all the videos on the YouTube channel as well, because it's really annoying for you to try and watch a video and then the thing just sits there and spools and spools and never loads. And YouTube is just incredible about how quickly things load. So I've started that YouTube channel, and the links to those YouTube videos will be here. I'm going to go here to the live recordings page, and you can see what that looks like. Right now, there's the online live from last week, which is kind of a course introduction. And then here's a video on how to take quizzes in Canvas. So you can find both of those from that online live recordings page. And then we'll post today's recording on there as well as soon as we're done. I've also put in the instructions of the quiz that same video on how to take the quiz, since this is your first one. It takes about 3 minutes. And I know you're going to open the quiz and you're going to see your timer start counting down and you're going to panic. But if you are curious, it'll just take a couple of minutes to watch that. Don't worry, it probably won't take you all 60 minutes to take the quiz. Remember, of course, you have 2 chances. So you may want to watch the video beforehand, or you can watch it right there in the instructions of the quiz. Okay, so let's get to the material. And then if those of us who are online have questions as well, feel free to chime in, or feel free to chat your questions, and I'll try and keep an eye on that. So the question Nick asked had to do with 2 kinds of graphs that we're going to discuss. And if you will look in your book, now I'm using version 1, edition 1 of the book, but edition 2 is almost identical. Edition 1 is the one I scanned in. They're almost identical. So it talks about a couple of graphs, and one of the kinds of graphs is a spectrum. So here we have a spectrum graph on page 39, and here is another representation of that spectrum graph. And the question is, when you look at a graph like this, what is on the x-axis and what is on the y-axis? And so I've moved the camera over here so I can see this whiteboard out here in the distance. I'm gonna talk about that. So in the spectrum view, and hopefully you'll still be able to hear me, but in the spectrum view, we have basically our y-axis. Oh, that's brilliant. I've chosen a whiteboard marker that doesn't work. Let me see if I have a better whiteboard marker here. This one hopefully is a little darker. Go there. Nice, Nick. All right. Education major. All right. Let me have it. That's right. Phantom whiteboard marker coming from Nick. See how much fun this is? Aren't you glad you tuned in? Okay, so here is our graph for the spectrum, and the spectrum is the way we represent sound graphically that takes a sound at one moment in time and takes a snapshot. Okay? And so if there is a sound, it's creating sound waves in the air, and we are going to take one snapshot at 1 millisecond of time, 1 moment in time, and we're going to graph what sound is there. And so in this case, the y-axis represents the amplitude. Now we learned hopefully in the text that amplitude is another word for loudness or volume. The word we use all the time is volume. That's kind of the psychological construct, or loudness is a more correct term, loudness. But because volume is really a physical term that means the amount of a quantity, right? So when we talk about volume, we really mean about how loud something is. And so the better word we're going to use is amplitude. That's the force, really, of the vibration of the air molecules, okay? And so here we have amplitude. That's how much force there is. We measure amplitude in decibels, or sometimes dB/SPL, which is decibels of sound pressure level. And so, and then along the x-axis here, in the spectrum view, this is the spectrum view. Along the x-axis, we have the frequency, okay? And the frequency is measured in hertz. And we say that the hearing frequency, did you pick up on that, Nick? What's the range of human hearing?
Range of human hearing is from 20 hertz to 20,000?
That's right, so about from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. Not a bad thing to know for the quiz, what I'm just saying. 20 to 20,000 hertz. So we can put any numbers along here. I'm going to say 20 hertz right here, and I'm going to say 20,000 hertz right here. So let's say that there is a sound in the air. Let's say that it is a perfect sine wave, a perfect tone at, let's say, 440 cycles per second. That's the pitch, by the way, they tune orchestras to most often. So somewhere along here is 440 cycles per second. And what we would get is we would get a bar that would represent how loud or how much of that pitch we have. So we use the spectrum view with volume or loudness or amplitude here and frequency here. We use that to represent what sounds are in the air. So when we talk about resonance and we talk about the overtone series, a sound, for example, of the oboe, which is the instrument that they play in the orchestra, they'll play the oboe and then everybody will tune to it. Now, I used to think that the reason they played the oboe is because it was the purest sound. Let's see if I can see. Nope, can't see hardly anything in there. Can you kind of see on this? Not really. I'm pointing at a whiteboard with nothing on it. So the I used to think that A440 was the purest sound coming out of the oboe, so everybody could tune to it, but that's not really the truth. The truth is the reason we use the oboe is because the timbre, the resonance, the sound of the oboe actually creates an overtone series which represents clearly that pitch in various octaves. So you actually have a 440 and you'll have an 880. See, every octave is a doubling, and then you'll have a 1720, and you'll have a what is that? A 3480. Okay, so in that sound of the oboe playing, boop, there's actually the presence. What you're hearing is actually a little bit of that, an octave above it, and an octave above that, and an octave above that. And that makes it easy for instruments at various ranges to be able to hear that pitch, one of the reasons they use that. So we use the spectrum view to describe things like resonance and tone color, the overtone series. We also use it to describe the way either a microphone or maybe a speaker reproduces sound. So a certain microphone, for example, like the SM, the Shure 58, is a very very famous kind of workhorse microphone used a lot for vocals. It has a certain spectrum of sound that has a graph, and that graph might look like this along the spectrum, and then it rises up a little bit and then goes like this, and it gives you a little bump. Isn't that cool what I'm doing here with the board? It gives you a little bump around the sweet spot for the vocal area, and it's one of the reasons people like that microphone for vocals. It actually adds an element of sound. We also use this Spectrum View for an equalizer, for example. Just think of the treble and bass in your car stereo. The low end of our spectrum over here is the bass, and the high end is the treble. And when you turn up the treble, you raise the amplitude in this part of the spectrum, as opposed to when you turn up the bass, you raise the amplitude in this part of the spectrum. Okay, so that's the Spectrum View. Now, there's another way that we use and describe sound waves, another kind of graph. That's on page 18. So if you look on page 18 and 19, there's another example on page 20, you will see a representation of the sound wave on a different kind of graph. And what we are doing in this case is we are representing sound specifically as it vibrates. Okay, so if I've got an air molecule, and let's say the green tip of Nick's marker here is an air molecule, and when it's stimulated by my voice or by an instrument or anything like that, it wiggles back and forth. Okay, it just moves back and forth, and it can move up and down, it can move side to side, but it wiggles in the air. Okay, and then it pushes against other air molecules, and we call that wave propagation. It moves the molecules. As they compress, we call that compression, and as they bounce back, we call that rarefaction, and those are all terms in the book that you'll want to learn. But as it wiggles back and forth, we can describe how much wiggle and how fast the wiggle is, and we use this graph on the bottom of page 18 in edition 1. I think it's page 19 in the second edition. We use that graph to describe that. And what we do is we take that graph, we take the wiggle, and let's say it this way. We put it on its side. Okay, so I'm gonna go like this, and you can kind of see hopefully my graph in the background on the board. But I'm going to take that wiggle, and in time, I'm going to move it along the graph. So what I get is here's the wave of the molecule going up. There's the molecule going down. So as I go in time, the molecule goes up, and the molecule goes down. Boy, it'd be cool if I could add some animation to this. Wouldn't that be cool? So I've got up and down. And so in this case, the up and down is how much amplitude, that's how much movement there is, right? And this side of the graph is the x-axis of the graph is time. Okay, so as time moves, we get some movement there. And we are able to draw a graph. So in that case, we have, again, amplitude or volume here, and now we have time. And in this case, we will draw the vibrating of the air molecule, and it looks like this. It goes up, moves away, and then it moves back to the center, and then down, and then back up. We call this a sine wave, right? This is a perfectly even vibration. The truth of the matter is air doesn't always vibrate that way. In fact, it rarely does. It usually vibrates something like this, right? This kind of a jagged thing that's going on, because the air molecules are influenced by so many different sounds. And even in this room right now, there's my voice, there's the echo of my voice, there's the hum from the computers. All of those sounds affect the same air molecules, and they wiggle. The miracle is the fact that those air molecules get in our ears, and we can actually perceive individual sounds, even though they're really all mixed together, right? So it's kind of fascinating. In the first part of the first chapter, it talks about those vibrations and talks a little bit about the ear and how the ear works. It's really quite fascinating. I hope you'll enjoy reading that. So that's a little bit about the waves. And in the process, we covered really several topics from the course at the same time. So did that clarify for you what you were asking?
Yes.
I want to make sure that when you see questions about that on the quiz, you know how to describe that. Okay, let me turn it to those people in the online. Have you guys got any questions that have come up as I've been talking? Feel free to type in the chat area or to chime in by voice. Let's see. Hunter, are you being able to hear us? I'll let him chime in. Yeah. Hunter, can you hear us? I think he's good. Okay, so by way of review, just a couple of things to point out. I think there are 40 questions on the quiz, and you're going to need to type in the answers and fill them out. You notice that this first chapter talks about sound. It talks about how airwaves are generated, the way that through different instruments we create vibrations, and as those vibrations take on the character of the sound of either a person's voice, right? We have a person in the music department has this incredible voice, one of the faculty members. Well, he's got a big head. It's just the truth. He'll admit it, right? He has a head with a frame that is really large, and the air vibrates. And one of the reasons he has this terrific bass voice is because of the shape of his head. It's fascinating. You know what I'm talking about. It's incredible, right? It's an amazing instrument. And just in the same way, the shape of a flute, the shape of an oboe, the shape of a trumpet, and the way that the air is stimulated through those instruments creates the characteristic sound of each of those instruments. Some important information about the bones inside the ear, the ossicles, and the shape of the cochlea and the basilar membrane and all those things. So you want to look at that. We also learn about in the book the way our mind internalizes. We don't talk too much about it, but we describe that we call this music perception, music cognition. It's the way our mind processes and thinks about the way we hear sounds. You know, it's fascinating if you've ever met anyone with something called a cochlear implant. So the cochlea is this important part of the ear. You see a picture of it on page 14 in the text, right? The cochlea is this important part of the ear where the sound vibrations through the ossicles are actually turned into liquid vibrations across this basilar membrane, which is in the middle of the cochlea, and it basically produces waves. Well, what's fascinating is that some people, the cochlea goes bad, and in the past, they think that this may be what happened to Beethoven. In the past, the person just goes deaf, but science has created this thing called a cochlear implant, and you may have seen someone with one of these. They have what looks a little bit like a hearing aid around their ear, and then they have an attachment kind of on the back part of their skull. Actually involves a surgery into the head, and it allows them, it taps into the auditory nerve and allows them to hear. The fascinating thing about this is that sounds through a cochlear implant don't sound like sounds. If we were, they're literally electrical impulses. So if we were to hear what it sounds like in a cochlear implant, it's just a series of what would sound like to us noises. But they tap in to the auditory nerve, and the brain is able to take sounds that the person has heard before and interpret those electrical impulses and create sound in the brain. It's quite fascinating because it really hits at this concept of how we perceive music and sound, this idea of musical cognition, how we think about it. Okay, so then we talk a little bit about a pitch, and you'll notice that there's kind of an important chart on the bottom of page 20, this chart right here, because it has an outline of kind of different pitches across the piano. And the important thing to remember about the way pitches work is that a frequency is very mathematical, right? So a frequency, the lower the frequency, the lower the pitch. We call the pitch high or low, but we're really talking about the frequency, the speed of the vibration of the air molecules. So if the frequency is high, then it sounds like the pitch is a high note. And if the frequency is low, then it sounds boo, like a low note to us. Every time the speed of the vibration doubles, what we perceive is something that we call an octave. So a really low note is, let's say it's an A, and if you double that A, I'm going to look on my chart here, in fact. Let's look at an A. I've got an A at 55 hertz. Okay, so I'm on the bottom end of my chart here. I found an A on the piano, and if you don't know musical notation, you're not familiar with the keyboard, that's fine, but one of those notes is an A, and it's 55 hertz. So twice that is 110 hertz, and you'll see on my chart at 110 hertz, I have another A. And then 220 is another A, and 440, which we've already talked about, is another A, and so forth. So it's really kind of interesting. And people think, well, wait a second, the hearing range is from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. That seems like an incredible amount, right? That's a huge range. But thinking about the fact that they double every octave, it's not as much of a range as you would think. So if we hear from 20 to 40, and that's one octave, then 40 to 80, that's two octaves, and 80 to 160 is three octaves. It seems like we're going pretty slow, right? But all of a sudden, 160 turns to 320, that's four octaves, and 320 turns to 640, that's five octaves. Let's call that 500, even though it's not quite, because then all of a sudden the next octave is 1,000, and then 2,000, and then 4,000, and then 8,000, and then 16,000. And all of a sudden at 10 octaves, we've pretty much outstretched the range of human hearing. In fact, the truth of the matter is, even though we say people can hear from 20 to 20,000, most people can't really hear much above 16. If you want to try this out, you can go online and do a tone generator and pick. This is like the hearing test they will used to do in school. I don't know if they still do them. And you can pick a frequency and see where you can no longer hear the frequency anymore. So most of us only hear about 16, 17,000 hertz. But that's only about 10 octaves. A piano has, 8 octaves by itself? And so we really can only hear a little bit below the lowest notes of the piano. The lowest notes of the piano are at 27 hertz. The lowest you can hear is 20 hertz. So the lowest end of the piano is about as low as we can hear. And the top end of the piano is about 4,000 hertz. So if I double that, that's 10,000. So I can only hear about 2 octaves above the piano. So we really can only hear a little more than the range of a piano. And that gives us a little better way maybe to think about this idea of 20 to 20,000 hertz. Okay. It's important for me that you understand some of these terms that are in Chapter 2. And they're terms that you're familiar with, but you may not be familiar with the technical term, right? So pitch, we talk about frequency. We talk about high and low sounding. And when I say high and low, I don't mean loud and soft. The next one is loudness. Loudness, the word we use is amplitude. And again, we talk about loud and soft in this case, not high and low. The next construct that we want to talk about is timbre. And timbre is the sound or the tone color of a sound. It's the characteristic elements of the sound that we were discussing. And the timbre, the way an instrument sounds or the way a sound appears, is really a combination of several elements. And you'll see that on the bottom of page 27 in the text, you'll see this graph on the bottom of page 27 right there. We have kind of a picture of a wave, and we see that there's this ADSR, attack, decay, sustain, release. So now in this case, I'm thinking about a sound that I may hear over the course of, let's say, 3 seconds. Bum. Okay, so bum, that first part is the attack. And then if I go bum, then maybe it's increasing towards the decay, or maybe it just stays the same, or maybe it gets softer. Bum. Okay, that's the decay. And then sustain is that time after the initial part. And then as it comes off, bum. If it stops, that's a quick release. If it fades off, that's a slow release. But these elements make up part of this timbre or tone quality, resonance of a sound. As instruments create these complex waves, they do more than just create a sound, but they also activate the molecules to vibrate sympathetically with one another. So because it's very mathematical, if there is a molecule vibrating at 440 cycles per second, there will actually be molecules in the nearby area that will start vibrating at twice that frequency. So mathematically speaking, different instruments can easily excite other air molecules at other frequencies, or even the same air molecule at multiple frequencies. And that's how we get this complex sound that we refer to as resonance, or this is what makes up the resonance in a sound. So all of this is part of timbre and part of the tone color. In that chapter 3, we then go into the spectrum to talk about this resonance and overtone series and tone color and so forth. Okay, I think we have basically covered the first unit. Any questions that have come up, Nick, in the discussion there? How about anybody online? Any other questions?
No. Covered everything.
Okay, good. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Then we will post this. Good luck, guys, with the quiz. We've already had 10 people or so complete the quiz, and people are doing pretty well on it already. And so encourage you to not wait till the last minute, and good luck with it. And we will see you either in person or online, or you'll see me in the recording next week. Remember, if you have any questions, feel free to stop by. My office is here in the Education Building. Education Building Room 240, and we'll see you later.